This book, Genocidio in Libya, Genocide in Libya, was started with a visit to Tripoli years ago in I think it was 77, 75, when one of the first times, that maybe even earlier, that I came to Libya because Gaddafi was there, he was making speeches. And I remember one of the speeches in which he spoke about Italian concentration camps, Italian tortures, Italian things that we never heard about in Italy. And I said, well, there must be something. Is there something true to this, or it's just propaganda? And I requested from the Libyan authorities, I said, okay, I'm coming to Libya, but I'd like to spend some time traveling around the country to speak to people, older people that might remember some of what happened in the past. And the government said, fine, why not? So they gave me a car. I brought my own interpreter. I brought a person to tape everything that was going on. The Libyans gave me an interpreter, and we worked together for 20 days, a month, traveling around the country from west to east and to the south. I spoke to a lot of people, the people that, naturally, they were older people mostly, because there was no young people that remembered what had happened in 1912, 13, or later in the 20s, the end of the 20s. And I went to see places that existed, still existed. And I said, okay, I get the story. I get your version at least. And I went back to Rome. And then I decided the only way I'm going to eventually write this book is if I find some document in Italy that will confirm at least some of the stories that I heard. And I went to the Foreign Ministry here in Rome. I got permission to go through its archives, and I found documents that were not Foreign Office documents, they were from the Ministry of Defense, from the Carabinieri, from the military sector, that had been sent to the Foreign Ministry and were forgotten there by somebody, including photographs and other stuff. And I said, can I take pictures? I can photograph this. You could do whatever you want at the time. I brought my own tape recorder and a printer to the Foreign Ministry. And I printed tons of documents, lots of things that are in the book that I spoke about. They all confirmed the things that I heard, and even went on to say things that were much more complete, and things that damaged even more the memory of that period, the Italian period of history. That's how the book started. When the book came out, the first edition, if I remember well, we could check it out, came in 1979. And naturally, I sent it to newspapers, and it was to lots of historians, local Italians, and a few of them said, it can't be true. We don't know anything about this. And who's this Salerno guy? He's not a historian. He's not a professor. He doesn't belong to a university. He's a journalist, and he's probably inventing things. And there were some people that didn't want to be involved with presentations and things like that. The only party that was interested in this thing was the Socialist Party, because the Socialist Party, if we remember well, was the only party that really was against the invasion of Libya in 1911 and 12. And so Craxi and his party were in the mood to say, this is our party. We oppose this from the beginning, and so therefore it is our story. Fine. The book was published by a man, Sugarko was a publisher. He died recently. He was connected very much to the Socialist Party, and so he had no problem. And the book came out, was sold out. And I got letters from lots of people, wanted to know more, and it went on that way. It went on that way, but I realized, because I left Libya as a subject at that time, more or less, to do something else in the newspaper business. I was the foreign editor of Messaggero, And then I was dealing mostly with the Middle East and the Arab countries in that area, Egypt and Syria. And I found out by chance that the book was not translated, but very much in all the bibliographies that came out in the United States and in so many places, because it was the only book that really spoke about what the negative part of what happened in Libya at that time. Fine. Somewhere I could go through that period. Italian history was always very not talked about period, especially the Mussolini period. It's only relatively recently they started to get into damaging stuff about things that happened in that period. Maybe it was also because of the agreement between the Allies that put down Mussolini and attacked the Italy and got Italy out during the war out of the fascist rule. The agreement was that we will not go into major war trials. We won't do anything. We don't leave the history alone. We leave everything alone because we have a new enemy, which is the Soviet Union, and we don't want to damage our main ally eventually, which was true because Italy did become the main ally. But that meant also that very few Italians knew really what had happened before. The older people didn't really remember. They weren't interested in remembering. The historians, some knew, some didn't know. There were very few books that even mentioned the concentration camps. Very few books, even in the fascist period, that spoke about the aviation and what they did with bombs. I found the documents in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Italian aviation that bombed villages and sites in Libya with this poisonous, let's call it gas or poisonous, the iprite, which was interesting because I also found a document from the Carabinieri, which went into the site after the bombing and reported the damage. People died, the skin broke off, and all kinds of different things that today we probably will read about what's going on in different areas of the world, about checking out what happened then, if the thing worked, it didn't work. Naturally, the poison was banished way before that happened by the international community, and it was used again in many other occasions after the war and in other places. That's the first book, but there was nothing much taught about it. Then I think it was in 2005 or something like that, that an Italian who was born in Tripoli, if I don't remember, yes, 2005, and was the editor of another Italian newspaper called Il Manifesto, said, Eric, why don't you, we were traveling together to Libya, and he said, Eric, why don't you reprint your story with some up-to-date? We can bring together the story of what happened since then vis-a-vis Libya, relations between Italy and Libya. Italy didn't accept yet the damage, to talk about the damage that it did in Libya over all these years. And why don't you write something for us? We want to do it because nobody else is doing it. So I wrote this, an addition to this book. It's thinner, but there's more in this book than there was in the old one because the print is different. And I went on with it, which was sold out also. A lot of people wrote about the story, remembered in Italy, not only Italy, that I had written this book, and it was very important. But again, nothing happened. After, though, a few years later, there was an agreement by Italy and Tripoli to recognize the damages that we did at the time, to give some payment, retribution. There was talk of rebuilding a highway that the ancient Romans had built along the coast that was supposed to used to connect Tripoli with Benghazi. And naturally that passed through that area of Cyrenaica, which was massively damaged during the war. We talk about massively in the sense that most of the victims of the Italian colonialism were from Cyrenaica, were from that area around Seba, below Seba, into the desert over there. So I wrote this new edition, and everything was there, but nobody really talked about it after that. I went back to Libya, to Tripoli, and I think after that the civil war started, and a year or two later, and again the same publisher said, "Why don't you write about what's going on in Libya today?" And we came out with a third edition. Part of this is what had happened in colonial times. In other words, the version that they had already reprinted. The first chapters are the same thing, and the rest is the story of what happened after Gaddafi started ruling and how we got into the civil war eventually. It was published in 2019 with all the tricks that was done, because Italy at the time was not really interested in supporting the parties that were in a civil war. There was a competition about oil with France, and we thought, and we found also proof that a lot of France was involved differently in creating connections to part of the country against another part of the country. It wasn't a question anymore of Gaddafi or not Gaddafi. It was a question of control of oil, of petroleum, that I think still goes on. What can I add to this? I think that one of the problems that we have in Italy, but maybe it's a story that I can hear about many countries, is that the young people are not interested in history. Especially today, where information is dealt with a tweet or an X or whatever it is on a phone, maybe on a computer. Unless you want to study history specifically, you don't get into history to the university, which is a different story. And nothing new has been coming out about that period of time. The historians that were dealing with Libya are not around anymore. Some of the historians that are still around are teaching and teaching other things. And I don't think there are many people that really want to know or care about our history or what happened then. So that is one of the big problems that we have in general with history over here, where lessons are like twits, little bits and pieces of story. We did this, we invaded this year, we did atrocities from 2000 to 2001, from 2005, I'm talking about, we're bringing up today, 2005 to 2006 in April, and that's all. There's no real detail about what has been going on. And the younger people are not really informed, as I said, unless I talk to people today about Libya. First of all, they want to know where it is. And once they realize, I spoke to a granddaughter. She's in the university, and I asked her a few months ago, "Did you hear about what is going on in Libya, the floods, and where Libya? Where the floods? What floods?" She hadn't read. It was 3 days after what had happened over there happened. She did not know anything about it because she was in her own business, dealing with her own things, and she really didn't care about it. I don't think she even went to read up and check up a day after I spoke to her about it. So her interest was very, very little in that. She was interested only in the subject she was dealing with. And that's what's been going on with information, with history, and with the present also, because the present, there is a story. As a journalist, I would say there's an ongoing story in Libya, definitely. I don't think there's been a word in the newspapers in Italy about the civil war, the aftercome of the civil war, the situation the country is in today, or the floods, which gave way to other news in the meantime. I don't think there's anything in the Italian newspapers for months, if not years. And that happens with everything. You could check up today with the fact that Italian newspapers, at least, are not writing anything except a little bit, a note every now and then about Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, because it's not on the top of the list. We're talking about Palestine, we're talking about Israel, we're talking about Gaza, death on one side, monsters on the other side. But one of the monstrosities is that all this is happening, including Palestine, because for years there was nothing written about that. For months, everybody forgets about it. There's a war. I'm sure when it will maybe end, before it might end, there will be a stop. And I don't think that if there's a stop, we will talk about it, or they will talk about it in newspapers for much longer, until something else big happens. I think that's important at this point to, what has been going on and what is going on today in Italy with our students, with our politicians, is a continuation of what we did over the years. We don't think about it very much. You, as Libyans, as younger people, I think have to continue talking about your past, your history. You remember what went on. You were not there, but there have been many books written in Italian, many books today that are Italian, many books that are written in English, many books that you will find in the American press and in Britain. And I think that you have to know your history well, not because you want to take vengeance or get at Italy because it did bad things. We're living hopefully in peace, and we want to be at peace with everybody, including, and even more so, the Libyans today, because we were very close. You're just across the lake from us, and vice versa. And I think that we have to come back to a period in which I know that many Libyans used to come to Italy for medical treatment, for universities and assistance of different kinds. I think we should, and tourism had started in Libya. Today, I don't think there are any Italians that are wandering around Libya as tourists. And maybe you're coming to Italy, even though it's expensive over here, it's possible. But I think we have to get to a better place and go back to the connections, the good part of our history. And one of the first things that I saw about Libya when I started dealing with Libya, and I have a book here someplace, was a collection of, it's a book about, and a collection of photographs and etchings of the stuff that was done in the Tadar Takakus, which was done by Italians in the period when Italy was under fascism still. But these were scientists, these were people that developed the country, that looked at your history, wanted to understand more. And I think that as our histories go back for many thousands of years, as we were conquerors as Romans, and then we became, in a certain sense, brothers, having emperors of the same nationality, I think we should continue our connection, and you have to get, obviously, your act together, and you have to make peace with your brothers, first of all. But I think we also have to come back and get our young people to meet with your people so that we can continue on a peaceful world towards knowing each other and appreciating what is good about both of us.